After a decade-long career in advertising, I found myself at a crossroads. I had a successful career, was making a good amount of money, and I was winning awards. My team and I were winning awards for our work. But at the end of the day, I was selling deodorant. And I just knew that there was something more for me out there in the world. So I moved from firm to firm, trying to shake this feeling. But I couldn't. Was I really going to throw away this whole career because of a feeling? Well, I did. I ended up running my own branding shop where I focused specifically on social good brands. I'd always been involved in the social sector since I was a little girl in some way or another. But this was the first time I really dove headfirst in. After just a couple years, I found myself hooked. This is what I was supposed to be doing, making a difference, changing the world. I now actually run an organization that empowers women and children through community programming to elevate health and livelihood in India and the US. And like any good student, as I joined this new industry, I worked hard to truly understand this new space. And the more I studied, the more I saw a pattern that really confused me, and a pattern that became ever so stark when I saw it in my own organization. In 2013, we started a sewing program in a rural village in India. It cost our organization $1,000 to send 40 women to a 3-month sewing program. At the end of this course, the women had the opportunity to take a job that we'd set up for them. About 30 women took this job. We were thrilled. The household income shift for each of these women was dramatic. And so we were checking all the boxes. Skill empowerment, check. Women's empowerment, check. Economic development, check. But when we moved the same program just 25 miles down the road, 0 women took the job. Was this program not as good as we thought? What were we doing wrong? What were we missing? But instead of shutting this program down because of the numbers, instead we spoke to the women that took the course but not the job. And we learned something that I know that we knew intuitively, that there was more value to the program than just the dollars in her pocket. But every woman took this course for her own reasons. Alka here took the course because sewing was something she did all the time. She just wanted to become better at it. Niru here, she wanted to get out of the house a little bit, get away from the mother-in-law. Chandra, she wanted to spend time with some of her friends. And Sudha, well, she didn't have any friends, so she wanted to make some. Each of these women took this program to cultivate their dignity, to connect with something bigger than just the rupees in her pocket. You know, in my old industry, we talked about this difference as quantitative and qualitative metrics. When I was looking at these two different industries and how they measure both qualitative and quantitative metrics and the return on investment in the same way, I really should have taken a look at the name of my new industry. The fact that it's an entire industry that's defined by what it's not supposed to do, non-profit, seems like should have been my first clue that we were going to have some evaluation issues. After this program, I would visit the village more and more, and I met a young woman named Shruthi. We continued to expand this program because, of course, we saw it was a success. Shruthi was this wonderful woman who was completely withdrawn. She would never look at you in the eye, she never really showed you her face, and she gave one-word answers. She took our course, but then didn't take the job. I was lucky enough to see Shruthi about 6 months later. She was transformed. She was wearing a bright yellow sari, had one smile from the ear to the next, had gotten bangs, and suddenly was the beacon of her community. She thrusted her hand to me and said, "Didi, nice to see you." Didi means sister. This is when I knew that there was a fundamental change in Shruthi. She saw herself as my equal, as her sister. This is why I do the work we do. It's this type of transformation that's not just about the change in her pocket, but about her capacity to believe in herself. Her capacity to not just think about what she's earning today, but what she can develop for tomorrow. We were cultivating Shruthi's dignity so that she could dream beyond her circumstances. You know, we collect lots of quantitative measurements, and I am not for a minute suggesting that quantitative metrics in the nonprofit world aren't important. They're essential, especially in areas like extreme poverty. But for the work that we were doing around women's empowerment, around development, in this case, household income wasn't the right metrics, but yet all of my funders were still demanding these numbers. I started thinking about what really dignity is. Where does it come from? For me, dignity really comes to life in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the concept he describes as a desire for strength, for adequacy, for confidence in the face of the world. I love this phrase, confidence in the face of the world. There's such a generative property to it. Like dignity is something you can create, but yet it also has to be reciprocated in the face of the world. A lot of us in this room, we might take our dignity for granted. It's not something we have to think about on a day-to-day basis. But for someone whose dignity is being stripped away from them time and time again, day after day, their dignity could mean life or death. Their dignity could be their long-term success. Think about the dignity of a homeless person, or the dignity of a mother living in a refugee camp, or the dignity of a young girl who doesn't know the power of her own voice. When we think about dignity as a human right, we start to really understand its value in the nonprofit world. This whole sector, it's not about the number of wells that we build. It's about the women and children that are having access to water because of those wells. It's not just about the number of schools that we build, it's about the minds of those children that are changing in that school. I had a really hard time communicating this to my funders, maybe because I was new at my job, or just because I was more focused on the people I was serving, and less so on the metrics. Because if I had just looked at the metrics, Shruthi's life, well, she would have been considered a failure. But Shruthi was not a failure. Her outcomes were the following. She was transformed. Her daughter was now in school. Her mother-in-law was treating her better because suddenly there was a use for Shruthi in the house. She smiles more. She feels so good about herself that she comes to all of the programs that our organization hosts, whether it's on menstrual health or vision programs. And suddenly she's this beacon of information for everyone in her village. And of course, she has the fashionable bangs. I couldn't help but think, what if someone looked at my life in advertising as a success and looked at my life now less so? I mean, if we're just looking at the numbers. I work way more hours now than I ever did. I make significantly less money. And I now have to fundraise for everything that I want to do. But I can assure you that that's not the case. Because the work that I do cultivates dignity not only for me, but for everyone that we serve. You know, I just mentioned that we have to fundraise now. And the way that most nonprofits fundraise is they apply for grants from corporations and institutional funders. But every time I was applying for a grant, I was being asked for metrics that were totally disconnected from the work that we were doing. Or when I was going to corporations and asking their CSR team for money, they kept making me translate our work into dollars and cents so that they could explain it to their shareholders. And somehow, most disheartening, when I was looking at annual reports of organizations that I really admired, all I saw were outputs. I didn't see outcomes anywhere. I didn't see Shruthi's transformation anywhere. Why are we measuring our work in dollars and cents and widgets and not focusing on the lives that we're actually changing? Why are we asking the corporations to speak our language instead of the other way around. I feel like we're an entire industry using the wrong measuring stick to measure our work. Sometimes I kind of feel like institutional funders are like my jealous boyfriend, where I spend my whole time proving to him that I'm not cheating on him, so I actually don't do the thing I'm supposed to do, love him. What a revolution our industry would face if those on the ground were actually trusted by those investing in them. Again, I want to make very clear that I do believe deeply in quantitative metrics. We collect and report many of them. But we don't let quantitative metrics guide us and tell us what is working and what is not. We're on the ground. This is what we do. We know what works. The work that we do has to be more than just about the numbers. The nonprofit sector cannot be, we provide X number of widgets to Y number of people for Z investment. We're talking about people's lives here. It's about keeping the sewing program open despite the numbers, because we know that one woman's dignity has an impact on not only her life, but on her daughters, on her mother-in-law, and on the entire community. If we create programs that are void of dignity or hoping that dignity is a happy byproduct, we run the risk of actually trapping people in a cycle of poverty, forcing them to only think about what they have today and not what they could create tomorrow. How do we measure Shruthi's success and how she felt after a sewing program? I have to admit, I actually don't have any answers for how any of this is solved. I don't know how this mythical dignity quotient that I'm talking about works. I don't even think that dignity is the only qualitative metric that we need to measure. But I do know this. I know that when we're talking about people's lives, we cannot reduce them down to dollars and cents. I know that my life and my work would be so much better if I didn't have to answer a litany of measurements that didn't serve my work. My work would be so much better if the organizations that we work with, corporations and funders, actually worked with people that they trusted. I guess what I'm trying to do here is inspire a revival of dignity. Dignity is an abundant resource that we can all generate. Let's re-inject dignity back into our ideology collectively so that it affects our methodology, not just in my industry, but in every industry. So moving forward, I'll be leaving lots of sections of grants blank, hoping that they can see beyond the numbers and understand the work that we do. And I hope the next time you write a check to a nonprofit, you think about the lives and the dignity that you're cultivating. Because I know that Shruthi's life cannot be measured in numbers, and neither should anyone else's. Thank you.